Hello and welcome. This is India Global. I'm Gaurie Dwivedi. Let's get the show going with headlines this evening. First up, Russian President Vladimir Putin is all set to visit India, even as dates are yet to be confirmed by Kremlin. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer makes big FTA announcement. India, UK are all set to relaunch their FTA negotiations early next year. Starmer says that trade deal will support jobs and prosperity in the UK. External Affairs Minister Dr. Jaishankar meets his Chinese counterpart. He and Wang Yi discuss border disengagement, even as major updates have come in terms of India-China looking to now work closely. Canada is set to increase screening for Indian travellers. Canada says that increasing security is being done out of caution. This comes on a day when Trudeau's minister in his cabinet meets banned Khalistani outfit leaders. And big voices on India Global today. City of London Corporation's Chris Hayward on NDTV, along with former climate minister from Norway, Erik Solheim, speaking on the latest in the climate talks. All right, the first story and the big story that we're discussing today is the latest as far as the G20 summit is concerned. It's underway in Brazil's Rio de Janeiro. Prime Minister Modi has also held several key bilaterals that have taken place today. In fact, India, US, China and France were among the top leaders at the G20, and leaders discussed trade, climate change and international security as the primary areas of focus. As far as India is concerned, its message was one earth, one family and one future. Very clearly, that's what it focused on. And Prime Minister Modi urged the G20 members to prioritize the challenges that the global South countries face. He also said that as far as global conflicts are concerned, climate challenges are concerned, they are felt most acutely by the countries of global South. And as I said, this is at the G20, at the sidelines of the G20. Prime Minister Modi also held talks with his Italian counterpart, as well as the UK counterpart, and also the French President Macron as well. All right, let's get in Patsy of Voice of America to really fill us in terms of what all happened today at the G20, especially given the fact that the communique focused on comprehensive ceasefires in both Gaza and Lebanon. But the question really is it enough?
Hi there. Hi. Sorry. Yes, here I am in Rio de Janeiro, where the leaders are just starting to begin their day. And you mentioned the final communique. This is the leaders' statement that came out early this morning in Rio, Tuesday. And on Ukraine, it really is not the kind of strong statement that, at least from U.S. and Western perspective, won. So this is very similar to the summit statement in New Delhi at the G20 that India hosted last year. It highlights the war in Ukraine, the human suffering, as well as the negative impact of the war on global energy and food security, on global inflation, and so on. But there is absolutely no condemnation of Russia. This is, of course, similar to New Delhi, but very different than in Bali, G20 Bali 2022, where there was no leaders communique on this issue precisely because of divisions between the G7 leaders and the rest of the G20. Now, on Gaza, the statement highlights similar suffering by the Palestinians and the negative impact of the war, and supported a comprehensive ceasefire in Gaza and in Lebanon. It also affirmed Palestinian rights to self-determination and a pathway towards a two-state solution. What I found notable about this statement on Gaza is that there is no mention of Israel's right to self-defense, which is something that the U.S. has always pushed for in various global forums. So overall, I would say that the G20 is, of course, made up not only of U.S. and Western allies in the G7, but also Russia and China, as well as the countries of the global south. So it's a very diverse group. It's no wonder that these kinds of leader statement really just underlines,
Right.
the lowest hanging fruit and the lowest common denominator. But from U.S. and Western perspective, this is not a statement that prioritizes their issues on Ukraine, on Gaza. It's not highlighted under their global conflict priorities.
All right, let's leave it there, Patsy. Thanks much for breaking that down for us. Patsy joining us live from Rio de Janeiro. All right, shifting focus now to the other big story that we are tracking, which is the latest as far as the UK-India ties are concerned. Prime Minister Modi met his British counterpart, Keir Starmer, and on the sidelines of the G20 summit. And despite this being the duo's first meeting, it marked a very significant moment as far as the ties between the two countries are concerned, given the fact there is now focus as far as the free trade agreement that's been in the freeze for a while now. It's now expected to come back to life with more negotiations likely to take place on that particular agreement. In fact, both Prime Minister Modi and PM Starmer spoke about some very important issues besides trade, which FTA is likely to focus on. Security and collaboration in global forums was another very clear area that was focused on. And in fact, let's quickly get in that report that's been filed by my colleague Arjun Mahindran on this.
There are clear indications of significant advancement in India-UK ties. New Delhi and London find themselves nearer than they have been in a while. PM Modi and UK PM Keir Starmer's meeting at the Rio G20 sidelines stands testament. The duo has reaffirmed its commitment to strengthen the India-UK comprehensive strategic partnership. With economy, trade, new and emerging technologies, research and innovation, green finance, and people-to-people contacts in their crosshairs, the leaders exchanged views on an array of issues. The importance of resuming free trade agreements topped the agenda. The leaders have decided that negotiations will resume in 2025. You see, the countries have been negotiating a trade agreement since January 2022. In fact, a deal was scheduled to be concluded by Diwali in October 2022. However, it was derailed when Boris Johnson resigned as UK's Prime Minister. Negotiations resumed once former UK PM Rishi Sunak assumed office, but were again delayed due to general elections in both countries. It is important to note here that the UK is India's 14th largest trade partner and the 4th largest export market. Bilateral trade between both countries stood at $11.5 billion in the first 6 months of 2024. Moving on, the leaders also reached consensus on how to better serve the consular requirements of UK's Indian community. The duo has announced the establishment of 2 new consulate generals of India in the United Kingdom in Belfast and Manchester. Not only this, PM Modi also urged Starmer to extradite fugitive Indian businessmen like Vijay Mallya and Nirav Modi, who are currently taking refuge in the UK. India has been trying to extradite 68-year-old Vijay Mallya to face charges of fraud resulting from the collapse of his defunct company, Kingfisher Airlines. He is accused in a bank loan default case of over INR 9,000 crore. The former Rajya Sabha MP was declared a fugitive economic offender in 2019. Meanwhile, 53-year-old Nirav Modi is one of the prime accused in the more than rupees 14,000 crore PNB loan fraud case. He fled India in 2018 and was declared a fugitive economic offender by a Mumbai court in 2019. All in all, this interaction also underscores the growing importance of India in global geopolitics, with leaders from different political backgrounds seeking stronger ties. Arjun Samar Mahendran for NDTV World.
All right, let's get an important voice from UK City of London Corporation's Chris Haver joins me to talk about the latest as far as the UK-India ties are concerned. Mr. Haver, thanks much for speaking to NDTV. Let me start by asking you about the UK-India infrastructure financing bridge and how it aligns with India's infra goals.
Well, there are two key objectives to the bridge that we have signed with Prime Minister Modi's government. The first is to provide and support with expertise and project management around the major transport infrastructure projects of Mr. Modi's government. And to that end, I've brought over with me here to Delhi some representatives of very, very large infrastructure project management and consultancy companies from London. And the second objective is ultimately to introduce potentially further capital funding for some of the projects individually as they gradually move through the bidding process. So we're hoping that this will be a partnership between the Government of India and the City of London. And the City of London, of course, is the global financial capital. So we do have huge access to capital markets.
Right. Specific projects that you can help us, that you are considering, that this entity is considering?
Well, they broadly fall into three categories. Firstly, road projects. Secondly, rail transit projects. And thirdly, renewable projects. And what we're doing here in Delhi this week is to start to narrow down what some of those specific projects right across India look like and which ones are going to be appropriate for us to take forward as the bridge.
Okay. In terms of the UK-India partnership right now, what more do you think can be done to strengthen it, given the fact that leaders of the two countries now realize the potential that it has?
Well, we've always had historically a very strong relationship, as you know, historically with UK and India. One of the things I'm keen to see completed is the free trade agreement, which of course was previously in negotiation before the respective general elections in each country. And I think would be, frankly, an excellent achievement for both the Indian and the UK government if that could be brought to a conclusion.
Absolutely. FTA is something that's now being brought back into the talks. But in terms of broader direction, where do you see UK benefiting from India's growth potential, given that it's really the fastest growing economy in the world right now?
Well, let me firstly say that we are extremely envious of India's growth trajectory. It is doing so incredibly well. The growth rates are phenomenal in this country, and we now need to get economic growth into the United Kingdom after some 15 years of no economic growth. So I think the opportunity for working together has never been better. I think City of London is a natural partner for India and for the Indian government, and hopefully through this bridge that I am co-chairing with Niti Aayog, that we will be able to contribute towards the ongoing growth of India and indeed helping to grow the UK economy at the same time.
All right, Chris Haver, thanks much for speaking to NDTV on the prospects of the UK-India partnership. All right, on that note, we're slipping into a very short break. We come back on the other side and talk more about, well, what is the latest as far as the decision made by Russian President Vladimir Putin to lower the nuclear threshold of Russia. Stay with us. All right, welcome back. This is India Global, focusing now on the other big story that's just developing as we speak, which is coming in from Russia as there is this very horrific anniversary that's coming in, which is the 1,000th day anniversary of the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Update coming in is that the Russian president has lowered the nuclear threshold for his country, which means that Moscow has updated its nuclear doctrine, whereby the conditions have changed, that a non-nuclear state backed by a nuclear power can also be targeted by Russia. This comes, of course, following US approval to Kiev to use ATACMS missiles that can go deep inside the Russian territory. Remember, Kremlin did warn that there could be a nuclear response to Western aggression, because President Putin says that this is increasing the aggression targeted towards Russia. What does it mean at a time when the world wants a solution to a conflict that's now dragged on for almost 3.5 years? 1,000 days is what it has gone on for. Let's get in my colleague Uma Shankar Singh, who is in Ukraine covering that war, giving us a sense of how things are unfolding on ground, even as the world is trying to find some sort of a solution around this.
As the Ukraine-Russia war has completed 1,000 days, it seems to be moving towards another dangerous direction. Russian President Vladimir Putin has signed a change in Russia's nuclear doctrine. Russia's new policy on the use of nuclear weapons released on Tuesday says that if Russia is attacked by a non-nuclear country in which it is supported by a nuclear country, then it will be considered a joint attack by the both countries on Russia. In such a situation, Russia can back down from following the policy of not launching a nuclear attack first. That means it can also launch a nuclear attack first. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov says that in a case of an attack on Russia with conventional weapons, Moscow will reserve its right to retaliate with nuclear weapons. In a way, Russia has directly threatened a preemptive attack, and that is also in a nuclear way. This change in Russia's nuclear doctrine has come after US President Joe Biden's decision, in which Biden has approved Ukraine's use of long-range missiles against Russia. Ukrainian President Zelensky had been demanding for this for a long time. After US permission, Ukraine can use long-range missile in the area of Kursk. Ukrainian army has captured certain areas of the Kursk, and Russian army's heavy deployment is there. North Korean soldiers are also present there to fight on behalf of Russia. That egged the US. After US permission to Ukraine to use long-range missiles, Russia called it a provocative step and is trying to pressurize America and Western countries by updating its policy of nuclear weapons. Putin has previously threatened that if Ukraine attacks Russia using Americans or Western countries' missiles, it will be considered that NATO has waged a war against Russia. And now that Ukraine is free to attack Russia with American missiles, Russia has also threatened to use nuclear weapons.
All right, shifting focus now to the other big story that the world is hoping to find a solution to, which is the climate talks that are taking place in Baku in Azerbaijan. And till now, no breakthrough has happened at COP29. Remember, time is running out quite literally, both for the conference as well as for the world, to try and find a solution, given the fact that the Global South wants more climate finance, and the developed countries are saying, we just won't fund it. You got to figure this out on your own. To talk more about this, I've got a big voice, which is the former Minister of Climate, Erik Solheim, speaking to me from Oslo in Norway. And Erik, thanks so much for speaking to NDTV. Let me start by asking you, how optimistic are you that there could be some sort of breakthroughs that may happen? It doesn't look very promising right now.
There is one breakthrough in Baku. It may look technical to people, but it's in fact really significant, and that is the rules on the carbon market, because that will make it possible for airlines, tech companies, medical companies, whoever, to channel money to environment assets. In the case of India, for example, it may bring money to the natural farming of Andhra Pradesh, tree planting in Madhya Pradesh, mangrove restoration in Tamil Nadu, or to the all-out green efforts of the state of Gujarat. All these states, and of course many more, I mean Sri Lanka, Nepal, the rest of the developing world, can benefit from these companies providing money for natural assets. And that money will be more unbureaucratic, easy to assess, than, sorry to say, the very bureaucratic money from the global financial system.
The fact is, Erik, developed and developing nations are not able to see eye to eye. So big breakthroughs look unlikely. How do we resolve this?
Look, this demand is 110% fair. I cannot support it more. And it's most important for the least developed countries. I mean, typically Malawi, Madagascar, Central African Republic. And it is indeed important for climate adaptation. However, for the massive investment in renewables in developing countries, this is not important. I mean, India, Bangladesh, Vietnam, Indonesia, well-functioning developing countries, they can access traditional finance because solar and wind is not cheaper than coal. It's not a cost if you go into solar, you save money. And in the case of India, you become independent of foreign oil. India has no oil. The sun is Indian, the wind is Indian. India shifts from oil to solar. It saves money. And
Yes.
it creates a better budget balance because the money will not go to Russia or Saudi Arabia or my nation Norway. It remains in India.
You mentioned India. What do you make of India's demand this year at COP29, which is $1.3 trillion till 2030 to help Global South and least developed countries, come to speed with the climate challenges?
Look, again, this is absolutely fair demand. U.S. emissions per capita up to today are 25 times Indian. And if you compare to, say, Africa, the difference is even bigger. So that's not the issue whether this is fair. I doubt that the money will come. Even if the money comes, it tends to go into global institutions, which are so bureaucratic, with so much red tape, and so slow that it hardly matters. What we see in India now is something very different. I mean, the state of Gujarat has now set a target of 100 gigawatt of renewable energy by 2030. That's a massive aim. It will put Gujarat as the 8th biggest nation in the world in renewables if it was a separate state. And they are financing that through the market and through traditional ways like the World Bank. And Gujarat is the lead state in India, but you see similar efforts in Andhra Pradesh, in Tamil Nadu, in so many other states. So India is not depending on this money, but some of the very poor nations and some of the adaptation purposes may depend on it.
Do you think that the entire process, this COP process now needs to be reformed, given the fact that every year it's the same story, complete gridlock in negotiations?
I think we should do a lot more to bring into the discussions business leaders and politicians who are out on the ground and understand economics and business development. Look, this is a process where diplomats are leading. They tend to understand finance to a very limited extent. They have never started a solar farm or a windmill or indeed started production of electric cars. They don't really understand this. The real attraction, what's happening in the world now, is the shift of business and the shift of politics, not the shift of diplomacy. Diplomacy can unfortunately be stuck for the next 10 years with hardly any development. But the developments in the real economy matters. 3 years ago in Glasgow, the main quarrel was, shall we phase down or shall we phase out coal? Some Western diplomats and media even blamed India for the climate crisis. I mean, it's completely irresponsible and unacceptable. But the difference between phasing out and phasing down have no significance for any one single individual on planet Earth. What matters is the political economy. And when Prime Minister Modi is launching a scheme for 10 million or 1 crore rooftop solar plants in India, that matters. But the climate talks, so to say, have limited significance.
Unfortunately, that's all we have right now. COP29, a process that is compromised, but probably the best that the world has. Thanks so much, Erik Solheim, for taking out the time and speaking to NDTV. All right, on that note, completely out of time in this edition of India Global. Thanks so much for watching.